All right, everybody. Hey, welcome back. Good to see you guys. So we're about 5 minutes away, or 4 minutes rather, to 12:45, and we'll get started. It's Tuesday, May the 5th, and we have another important meeting. We're launching a new chapter. The last new chapter of material for our course is chapter 9. So today we have a lecture on that, and also a couple of quick announcements that I'm going to make about the final homework assignment and stuff like that. So if you're here now, welcome. Feel free to say hi, get involved in the chat, but we're just hanging in there for about 3 minutes as we wait for the class hour to begin. So hope you guys had a good weekend. Hi, Andy. How are you? Good to see you there. Hey, kitty. No? My cat's right here. Hi, Dana. Good to see you too. Kitty. Another few minutes. Welcome, everybody. Hi, Andrew. Hope you're doing good. Hey, she's back. Hey, Wes. Hi, girl. Good kitty. This cat's crazy. It's just, her name is simply just Kitty. What do you think of that? Hey, Kitty. You know, I hear a lot of people trying to spread false stereotypes about cats, talking about cats don't love you. Cats just, you know, they just want food. They just want to sit by themselves. And, you know, they're not companion animals like dogs or something. In my mind, nothing could be farther from the truth at all. Like, this cat is obsessed with me. She's constantly showing attention, trying to be right next to me. So I'm just saying, like, it's one of the most loyal, like, animals ever. Hey, Robert, good to see you there too. Everything's going well. Yeah. I mean, I guess it does depend. Perhaps some cats justify that description, but you know, when you just have a good kind of bond and the right pet, those close relationships, they just form. Okay, well, welcome back, everybody. It's 12:45, so we're getting underway. Let me just say hello and welcome everyone. Hope you're doing well. One question to get things started. Have any of you guys noticed my, you have some really independent cats. You've had 4 cats for over 20 years, Andrew? Wait, so let me understand what you're saying here. In your life or currently? I just need to clarify that. It's a little ambiguous, isn't it? So you mean like, well, I know you're not 80, so it's not like you had 4 in sequence for 20 years overlapping. Are they all still alive? Are you talking about they're all gone? Okay, yeah. What was the oldest one? I'm curious to know that. Do you know that answer? just because she's 16. So I'm wondering, is that on the outside edge of how old your cat's ever got to be? I don't know. Oldest is 22? Okay, well, that's good news for me. I could have another 4, 5, 6 years with this kitty. I'd be very happy. Okay, well, anyway, that's a debate we can settle another time. I'm offering you this animal as evidence that cats are extremely loyal and companionable. She's not independent at all. All right, so yeah, question though. Have any of you guys noticed my message that I sent today through Canvas? Let me know if you have gotten it, and that'll be helpful. Hey, Dominic. Did anybody notice it though? Please check, and then just to verify, because I want to make sure we're all clear about that assignment. Okay, good. Yes. So thanks for the confirmation. I did deliver this morning to you guys the instructions for the 4th homework assignment, which is going to be due next Thursday. Let me just go over that with you while we're here at this live stream, and we can talk about it one time. Sorry, I just have to pull it up on my phone so I can read the prompt to you. Okay, just a second, and here we go. Cool, okay, yeah, so I'm just looking at the text of the email that I sent to the class. So you have one more homework assignment. The original date in the syllabus was that it was going to be due next Tuesday, the 12th. That's a week from today. But I made the decision to just adjust it slightly. So instead of next Tuesday, it's going to be due next Thursday, the 14th of May. And so our class is down to just 2 more things for you to do. Number 1, the homework assignment of next Thursday. Number 2, the final exam. The quiz that you guys just took on Thursday, thanks for taking that, and I'm working through the grading of it. I'll be done with all the grading for that quiz by the end of this week. So you'll definitely be able to check for your score by the time of this time next week, but before even, because I'll finish the grading Saturday or Sunday in all likelihood. So anyways, yeah, I'm working through the grading of your last quiz. After that, we're just down to the final homework and the final exam. So anyway, yeah, it's due next Thursday. Just make sure you know that. It's also indicated in the message, and if you want, of course you can and you should go and look at the written instructions that I sent to you on Canvas. So here's what it says in the message anyway. It said, "Dear class, hello everyone. I just wanted to send a notification of the details of your upcoming 4th homework. Please note the adjusted due date of Thursday, the 14th of May. Okay, so first of all, before I read that, the 4th homework is basically critical analysis of the media. What you have to do is watch a 30-minute televised news broadcast. So you have to watch 30 minutes of TV news. And you have to then, based on that viewing, produce 2 documents. Okay, so one of them is basically just kind of like identifying information and table of contents. So the first page is basically where you're just going to provide this info. The station that the show was aired on, the time and the date that it was broadcast, and then the name of the broadcast. So like, for example, I don't know, Hannity, Fox News, Thursday, May 7th at 8 p.m. Or Anderson Cooper 360, CNN, Friday, May 8th, 9 p.m. You know, so you just have, like, that's one piece of info that I just want from you, to tell me when the show was on TV, what channel it was, and what the name of the show is, okay? And then you got to watch 30 minutes of that show. The 30 minutes of news that you view, okay, you then have to create an itemized list, which provides every story that was reported within the 30 minutes, plus the amount of time that was given to that story, so how much airtime it had, which means that you're going to have to watch this together with like some type of stopwatch or time measurement device. And you have to keep minutes and seconds. So you have to keep detailed time records of each story. So basically, like, your first document is just going to show, again, name of the show, station, time and day. And then like a bunch of numbered stories with like just a 1-sentence little headline description. And then the time signature of that story for each one that appeared in the 30-minute window. Like, for example, story number 1, Trump addresses the media with coronavirus task force, criticized for comments, blah, 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 and time, 1 minute, 23 seconds, something like that, right? Next story, coronavirus epidemic threatening meat processing facilities. Time, 47 seconds, however long it was, right? And then you're just going to give me that full listing. That's just one document. Now, separate from that, you write a 2-page typed report where you go into critical analysis of the overall content, quality, and news value of the broadcast itself. So that's where I want you to kind of bring the tools of critical thinking to bear on this media viewing. You're going to basically try and display the knowledge of concepts that you've learned throughout our semester in that. So you would talk about if there are fallacies, rhetoric, misleading logic, faulty arguments, bias, the use of misleading graphics, set design, or music to try and shape or manipulate the viewer's experience. And those are the kind of things that I want you to be able to point out. You want to be critical. You want to be able to try and find fault. A good critical thinker doesn't just say, that was fully informative and I really enjoyed it and I loved watching the news, the end. You know, that's no criticism. So a critical thinker is trying to find fault. You're trying to find areas where you could make some fair-minded criticisms of the quality, the content, and the news value. Also, you can make as part of your critique mention of the allotted time given to different stories that appeared. So for example, one thing that's true, especially of like local news, is that a lot of time is given to stories that have less of an important human or political impact on the citizen. So like a lot of time is consumed by sports, entertainment, gossip, celebrity gossip, and weather. Now, right now, there's not too many sports being played, so that might not be true in that one case. But a lot of times, you know, they will spend like 2 or 3 minutes on a celebrity breakup or marriage or baby, and then like a very short amount of time on a more significant political or policy issue or public health issue. So that could be part of your commentary. If you see them giving like a bunch of time to frivolous stories and almost insignificant or no time to more significant news items, then that could also be something you mention. Okay, so now I'm going to go back to the written text of this, which I've just tried to describe in speaking to you right now. Here's what it says. Assignment number 4. Watch a 30-minute television newscast. Write down each story that is presented and the time spent in seconds and minutes on each story. Oh yeah, Andy, I will get to your question in a moment, so not to worry. But just for the moment, watch a 30-minute television newscast. Write down each story that is presented and the time spent in seconds and minutes on each story. Then write a 2-page typed report in which you evaluate the choice of stories the newscast presented and the overall news value in terms of content and quality. Use the tools of critical thinking that you have learned in this class, and remember that a good critical thinker will be able to spot problems, find fallacies, and generally find fault with what they see. Any editing tactics, such as music, lighting, graphics, etc., should be noted if they attempt to manipulate the viewer's experience. Do include the name of the newscast, the network, the time, and the date. And it also has one note at the very bottom, which I want to make sure we know. You're not supposed to watch like comedy or satire versions of the news, even though sometimes there actually is valuable news content in some of those shows, like, I don't know, Daily Show with Trevor Noah, Late Night with John Oliver. You know, sometimes they actually do have interesting and informative stories, but it's laced with humor and sarcasm and everything. So my request to you, well, the rule, is that you may not watch a comedic news broadcast. So it has to be like a bona fide actual news show, which is not intending to entertain by means of laughter its viewers. And then also, I don't want it to be a news feature broadcast. So basically, sometimes a news hour will be consumed with just one topic that they devote the entire segment to. Like you'll see Fox News special on the coronavirus, or MSNBC special news feature on ISIS, and it's just all about that one issue. But I want you to be able to basically have a genuine news hour, which is a traditional sampling of a variety of stories. So you won't be able to like have any value to the timing of different stories and comparing the editorial decisions of the broadcaster in terms of how much time they gave if it's all based on one story. So anyway, no news features where there's only like one or two stories in the entire time span. It should be a genuine news variety show. And then the last thing is this. Yeah, don't watch any news feature shows or comedies. Oh yeah, the other thing, okay, so Andy, your question. And it's a good question. So you're saying if I do not have access to live news broadcasts, can we use pre-recorded broadcasts or news websites that are recent in lieu of a live broadcast? Good. So having given this assignment many times before, I know that there are definitely some students that are going to have difficulties watching televised news shows. Some people nowadays don't really have TV and just use the internet for all their electronic information. So that's okay if you really cannot. Now, first of all, my preference, though, is that you would watch an actual news show, because I want it to be critical analysis of televised news media. But if you absolutely cannot do that, and again, you don't even really need cable to do that. If you even had basic just television at all, you could just watch channel 247, channel 9, channel 11, local news. But look, if you really have no ability to get that in, then okay, I would allow as a substitute a archived news broadcast that's been uploaded to the internet. But here's my requirement. It has to be originally broadcast as televised news and then uploaded afterward. Second, it has to be something recent, yes. So it has to be current news. I don't want people to go back to the archives and tell me about a news show that is from 2010, because that's no longer news. It's old news, and news is new. So I want it to be current day and dealing with the current issues. So yes, if you have to use an internet archived broadcast from TV, then just try to find one that's up to date and current and that was originally shown on television. Now, I see more questions. Dana, can it be a foreign news show? Okay, well, the thing about that, I know why you might say so, but it's going to be a little harder for me to be as judicious in my evaluation because I'm not as well informed about the news that is happening in other regions of the world. So, I wouldn't say absolutely not, but it's definitely not my preference. For sure, I would prefer if you have domestic news, something that's from a US-based media outlet. So if you can at all, please try to do that. And then, Andrew, you say this, YouTube carries rebroadcasts of many of these full broadcasts. Exactly, yeah. So you shouldn't have too much trouble going on like a YouTube channel, even those that are provided by the official news organization, which they then want people to be able to watch the shows later and, of course, advance their media footprint. So, yeah, you can do that. Now, in terms of suggestions, I leave it really up to you. It could be local news. It could be cable news. Sometimes the highly partisan cable news outlets, whether it's the more conservative Fox or the more liberal MSNBC, sometimes those could be like easy fodder for critique because evidently, there's a bias seen in some of those shows. So it's up to you, though, and I'm just leaving you at the discretion to pick and choose as you see fit which news show you'd like to focus on. But anyway, that's it. It's due next Thursday, so you have some time to do it. But as with everything in school, it's best to not wait to the absolute last minute because then when you're running short of time, quality of your own writing, it can get a little less organized and stuff. So in the best case scenario, you would take some free time this weekend when you got a lot of flexibility to just kick back and watch news for 30 minutes and write this report. But make sure you have your stopwatch handy. Make sure that you create an exhaustive list of all the stories that were presented, and then just write your little 2-page report. Double-spaced, 12-point font, normal margins, and that's about it. That's all I can think to say about it for now. But maybe there's other questions any of you have that I could respond to. If you do, let me know, either now or at any time during this meeting. If anything about the fourth homework it's not clear, if you want any other insight, tips, or anything else, let me know. But I think that's pretty much all I had to say about it. So it is due next Thursday, and And then beyond that, the only other thing is the final exam. So today then, we're starting the lectures for our last new chapter in the class. We just have one more chapter from the book to go through, and that's chapter 9, which is all about ethics. So basically, here's the updated, well, it's not updated, but it's all in the syllabus, and it's all going according to plan. But the remaining dates of our class go like this. This week, 2 lectures, today and Thursday, both on chapter 9. Next week, it's a lecture on Tuesday, where we're going to finish chapter 9. And then Thursday, that's when we're going to get started on our review sessions for the final. Then the week after that, that's week 16, the last week of class. Tuesday is the part 2 of the review session. And then Thursday, the 21st, that's the day you're going to take your final. And then that's the end. So there's a 16-week semester. This is Tuesday of week 14. We have 6 total meetings left, 3 lectures, 2 review sessions, and the final. Okay. So I hope that's all straightforward and easy to understand. But that's what I'm telling you guys about our class, and it's all in the syllabus too, and it's been noted on Canvas. So you got a lot of different ways to follow up and make sure that you have a strong finish to the class. The 4th homework is worth 100 points, just like the other 3 homeworks were all worth 100, and then the final exam is worth a maximum of 200. Now your quizzes, I'm grading them. I think I said that. I'm grading your recent quiz from last Thursday, and I'll have them ready by the end of the week. And when I'm done with them, I'll let you guys know over Canvas. And at that point, you can simply inquire by email for your grade on it, or your overall class grade, or anything else. And that'll be well in advance of the due date for the 4th homework. So you'll know your scores before you submit something else. Okay, guys, so if that sounds fair and that's all clear, I guess let's head into today's lecture information. So one last chapter of the book for us to go over. That is chapter 9. And chapter 9 is all about ethics. Ethics. That's the topic. That's the word. So let's see. You, I think, just off your own common sense, your life experience, and your English vocabulary, it's probably not the first time in your life you've heard the word ethics today. So tell me, what do you think about that word? What do you think it means? What if a little child comes up to you and says, hey, I heard a big word in school today. I don't know what it means, though. Can you tell me? What is ethics? Now, you're the adult. What do you say to this young child? Do you say to them, I don't know either? Good question. Or do you say something more informative to them? What do you say? That's my question to you, or the hypothetical question posed by this hypothetical child to you. What does it mean? What is ethics about? Just give me your gloss, like first things that come to your mind. Any keywords that pop up when you start thinking about ethics? Okay, so Dana, you're saying what you think is wrong or right according to your ideals. Good. That's a good starting point. And Andrew, you're saying integrity and how you operate. Well, integrity is only perhaps one little sliver of ethics. When you take a bigger picture thought process about it, what is it about overall? Overall, because the ethics can't just be about integrity. It has to do with contrasting things on one hand or the other hand. So I like the way you put it, Dana, when you say right or wrong. Does that ring a bell to you guys? Do you think that that sort of makes sense? Because it does. Ethics has to do with right and wrong. It has to do with what we call morality. Okay, so when we're discussing, debating, judging things to be right, to be wrong, we are thinking about ethics. So ethics is the study of morality and moral concepts. So I'm going to put that here, and then we'll build on that. What is ethics? So it is the study of morality and moral concepts. So anytime in life, so Dominic, you're asking, are ethics and morals separate things? Ethics is the field of study where we examine concepts like what are morals and what is right and wrong, what is good and bad. Morals is a term which is definitely it's an ethical term. I guess sometimes colloquially, like everyday folk, they talk about, my morals, like my perspective on right and wrong. And I guess sometimes that's the way people use the word ethics, like, well, my ethics tells me that this is not okay, or that this is good. But ethics, in the way that it's discussed philosophically in a book like this or in a class like this, is a little bit more rigorous. It's not just like, my beliefs about right and wrong. It's the concept of right and wrong itself that is being studied. So they're definitely related. I don't want you to overcomplicate it much in your thought, but when you think of ethics, you think of the bigger picture. What even is right and wrong? And what's the idea of that? And morals are more kind of like how you interpret what's right and wrong for yourself, or within your family, or within your culture or something. But they're closely similar. Now, what I've written here is that ethics is the study of morality and moral concepts. And philosophers throughout the generations, going back thousands of years, have written about and have discussed the topic of morality. So we're going to do it too. What you're going to learn is that there are actually established vocabulary of terms having to do with ethics, and there are specific moral concepts that have been well discussed by many powerful minds over the generations. So we're going to try and understand what different people have said about the concept of morality, and try to give us a little bit of food for thought for our own moral reflection as we live human lives. Because see, we human beings have got the concept of ethics built into us. And that's unique to humans. If you're like, let's say, a non-human animal, and you do something like to another animal in the jungle, kill them, eat the eggs of like some mother bird or whatever, that maybe disadvantages the animal that's been harmed, but there's no ethical accountability. It's not like, that's just the law of the jungle, right? That's considered to be nature, and there's no right or wrong about it. It's just survival of the fittest. But in human life, we do establish and live according to a system of rules which holds us accountable for a breach of ethical conduct. So it's only a human being that if they steal something from someone, they're maybe going to be hauled away to jail, put in front of a jury, judged, and then incarcerated. So us humans have a very highly developed sense of rectitude, accountability, and moral responsibility. So we're different from the animals in that way. We have a very highly attenuated and developed sense of right and wrong, and we in fact develop entire systems, institutions, criminal justice procedures to try and keep people in line with what we judge to be the correct moral or ethical behavior. So with that said, ethics is something that really looms large in the life of every human being. You're being ethically judged, and you're also an ethical judge capable of judging others. Now, Andy, you say this, so it's fair to say that our conscience is the deciding factor on what's moral and immoral, or just and unjust. That's one way of looking at it. The conscience, we're going to talk about it actually as we go over chapter 9, but just to preview, the conscience that you're speaking of is thought of as like this internal, innate source of knowledge about what's right and wrong that can be developed and nurtured or somehow left to wither and die. But most normal, well-adjusted, healthy people do have a conscience. It's the part of you that would give you a sense of guilt if you transgressed morally. It's perhaps also the part of you that has a feeling of approval and approbation when you see good actions or when you do a good action. So conscience is one deciding factor, but there are many very specific moral theories that have a basis in reason instead of conscience also. So we're going to investigate all of those views. Okay, so next thing I want to do is I just kind of want to take it slow and build this discussion with you guys carefully. I want to ask some of you all, what do you think are some moral concepts? You know, because ethics is the study of morality and of moral concepts. But what are some moral concepts? We've already mentioned a few of them here in the chat, so it should be pretty easy to get this going. Let's talk then about moral concepts. Okay, so what are some moral concepts that come to your mind? When I'm asking you to talk about morality, give me some keywords. Okay, we're already getting started. So Dominic, you say justice, fairness, equality. Good. Let me set up this little list by writing it in terms of binary opposites. So you talk about justice, and obviously what's the contrary of justice? Andy, you just mentioned that. Injustice. So justice versus injustice, that's one pair of opposed, opposite moral concepts. Okay, so justice, people being treated fairly, with dignity, not discriminated or disenfranchised. Injustice, the reverse of that. Morally, we think justice is good and injustice is bad. What are other terms that are also in a way paired up but opposed to each other within ethics? You've got just and unjust, but there's also, for example, what and what. Let's continue and try to get a few more things up there. So trying to pick your brain. I'm trying to get it out of your brain and on this board. Compassion, I see what you're saying, Andy, and yes, compassion is a moral concept. That's fair. But I want us to focus for a moment anyway on like these binary opposites kind of thing. Andrew, you say truth versus lie. Hold that thought, but I'm not so sure it fits, but it's something in the ballpark. I see a couple of others here. So good and bad, or good and evil. Fair enough, but let's just go with a more limited good versus bad. Morally good and bad. So sometimes people do things, you approve of their behavior, maybe they donated money or time to help frontline healthcare workers, and you thought, wow, they didn't need to do that. That was really good. That was morally good. Or on the other hand, somebody's out there, I don't know, committing terrible crimes of violating other people's rights. You might say that's bad. Morally speaking, that's a very bad thing. So there's good and evil, good and bad, you might say, justice and injustice. Andrew, you say truth versus lie, but the thing is about that, truth itself could be judged intellectually rather than morally, right? So suppose that I just believe that the world is flat, like if I was a flat earther. I absolutely don't believe that, and I can tell you it's definitely false. But anyway, there's some people that think that. They have a false belief, and the vast majority of people have this true belief about the correct shape of our planet. But that's not really a moral debate, perhaps, even though we could perhaps associate epistemic and intellectual norms with moral norms. Like maybe you have a moral duty to seek the truth and to be rational. But some people would say, well, that's a separate matter. Like I could be a morally good person, but just be completely filled with my head with falsehoods. Andrew, but a lie is a deliberate act designed to deceive. That is true. So if you don't just mean falsehood or falsity, but deception, then I can understand what you mean. Honesty versus dishonesty. Correct. That is only one little subset, though, of moral concepts. And I'm trying to take the biggest possible picture in. So think along the same lines as we see here. Just, unjust, good, bad. Robert, you say equality versus inequality. It's kind of folded into the discussion of justice, and that's fair. How about this? You've heard the word moral, right? What's the contrary of an action or thing that is moral? Moral versus blank. Can you tell me that? What's there? Moral versus immoral. Yeah, good. Okay. There's another one that I don't think we put up there. They're all kind of synonymous in a way, or they're closely linked. You said good and bad. What's another pair of terms that's much similar to good and bad? So what we have here, just, unjust, good, bad, moral, immoral. Maybe one more? Right versus wrong. Exactly, I was thinking of that. Okay, Andy, so right versus wrong in a moral sense. And then I'll just put one more, okay? Morality, ethics, it depends on and it's about evaluating conduct in general of just other people, evaluating the rightness or wrongness of policies or positions that people take. Sometimes, of course, it also has to do with how you should act. It has to do with action and what things that you should do or what you shouldn't do. So we can also put on this table how a person ought to act versus how they should not act, how you ought to act versus ought not. Okay, so then, ethical versus unethical, that's fair as well. But at any rate, you guys kind of get the format here. I'm just trying to lay out on the table for you some basic moral concepts that appear in the mind when you do think and reflect on ethics. We're trying to get our grounding now and get situated on this new material, and it's all about ethics. So ethics, yes, it's the study of morality and moral concepts. Moral concepts are a bundle of terms and ideas that kind of range in this area. When you think about actions, behaviors, policies, whatever they may be, and you think, that's a good thing, that's right, that's a righteous thing, or that's moral. Or when you judge them, on the other hand, negatively, that's bad. The person doing that was wrong. That's an immoral action. That's unjust. People shouldn't act that way. When you make either an approving moral judgment or a negative critical moral judgment, you're thinking about morality. And we do this all the time. Sometimes you're the moral judge. Sometimes you're the subject of other people's moral judgment. Okay? And we just kind of want to be able to think more clearly and critically about what morality is and what principles that we should apply to our own moral standards and behavior. Now, when it comes to morality, moral decisions face us every day, big and small. Sometimes they're really big choices, like should I stay at home and take care of my mother who's sick, or should I go out and serve in the military to help defend against an enemy force? Both choices are going to involve some kind of compromise. If I stay with my mom, I can't help defend the country. If I go fight them, I'm abandoning the care of my sick mother. You know, a choice like that could be a moral dilemma. Maybe a person has a moral dilemma about whether they want to stay in a relationship or end it, or whether and when to get married, how many children to have, what major to select. You know, maybe there's one thing that you feel like would really be good for the world, but you're not, it's not as profitable, and you're kind of poised between those two sort of decisions. So ethical decision making, large and small. Do I ask the doctor to discontinue assisted breathing for an elderly relative who's now in a vegetative state, and they've given no advance directive as to what their will would be? You know, you have to face moral decisions. Sometimes they're big and life and death is on the line, and liberty and property. In other cases, little smaller things like, oh, should I turn in this plagiarized assignment, or should I just do it honestly? So we have to make ethical decisions, and we have to be subject to ethical judgments. That's just part of the life of being a human being, which of course we are. Now, a lot of times when we think about what's right and wrong, the reasoning process that we engage in is subconscious. Like, a lot of times you just end up having a feeling like, oh, I just feel like there's something wrong. I was messed up that happened. But many times anyway, we don't, in a sort of self-aware way, reflect on the basis for our moral conclusions. We just have them, like, a lot of times. So you sometimes see something happening and you're like, you know what, I feel like that's a good thing, and people, they should do that. And in other cases, you see something, you observe it, or you engage in it, and you end up thinking, that was just terrible. That's really something wrong. And a lot of times the reasoning process that is going on that leads you to those feelings is something that you don't actively reflect upon. But now, by thinking about ethics a little more in a theoretical way and studying it as a topic in school, we hope to try and make some of those unconscious moral reasoning processes a little bit more self-aware, so that you're not just kind of flying blind when you make moral decisions, but that you have a specific type of moral compass and some principles that you consistently apply to your life. Another thing about morality and ethics is that it's one of the areas where I think people are the most stubbornly resistant to changing of their mind or view. Well, let me get your question here, a comment, Dominic. You say, if it's something natural to humans, then is it something that cannot be learned or improved upon, or something that cannot get worse because of environment? Well, that is a very deep and philosophic question. What the authors and editors of this textbook argue, and what I've heard other people argue, is that the conscience is something that is like normally found in a healthy human being, but that it can be nurtured by the environment they are in, or not nurtured by that environment. So like, nature gives us a sense of morality, which probably conduces to our ability to survive and thrive as a species. But in a particular case, there could be people who don't have that capacity developed by their parents, by their community, or by their early childhood experiences. So, you know, some people become sociopathic or psychopathic, and they just don't care about anybody, and they could even kill people and feel nothing. That's definitely unhealthy and deviant. Most people would not have that type of psychological disposition, but it's possible. It's certainly not the norm, though. Otherwise, we would be living in total fear at all times, because most people would be out to just kill us and couldn't care less. But most people are not that way. So Extreme deviance from any sense of having a conscience is rare, but it can happen. And when it happens, it's because I think of early developmental experiences that prevent the full establishment of the person's conscience. It's kind of like language. Like we human beings, when we're born, we can't speak language like I'm speaking to you now. But we have the ability to learn it, provided the right environmental stimulus, right? Providing that you have the right kind of community and parents and teachers that are going to instill within you all the elements of language. There have been cases of children that were raised by like wolves, like a couple of cases, very strange cases. They were like found in the wild, and they never learned to talk, even though they were not like mentally disabled, and they could have otherwise learned to talk if they had been given the instructions when they were very young. So I think that sometimes conscience is kind of like that. If you don't have it developed or stimulated by the proper moral instruction and early childhood education, then it might not reach its fully developed state, or it could actually die off. But it's there to be tapped into with the proper environment. So there's a nurture-nature kind of mix. But very good and interesting questions. Next, I want to say this, though. As I was talking about, it's very difficult for many people to reconsider their ethical positions. You might be able to get a person to change their mind on something that they don't think has any ethical significance, right? Like the person thought that the coronavirus was just like the flu, but then you show them a lot of evidence about the fatality rate and the epidemiological statistics, and you change their mind, and they're like, you know what, I thought it wasn't that dangerous, but you've convinced me. I see that there's good reason to think otherwise. That's just about what's true and false, but on a moral basis, it's very hard for people to budge from their preconceived views. So say a person thinks that abortion is wrong. It's going to be very hard for anybody to make an argument to them, but hold on, like, can you consider that maybe there are important reasons to disagree with that? Like maybe the value of the woman's choice is more important than the preservation of the fetus. Or on the other hand, someone believes that a woman has a right to choose. It'd be very hard perhaps to convince such a person that no, abortion is a fundamental violation of the right to life. If you believe that war is justified, oh no, that war is never morally justified and you're a pacifist. Or if you believe that recreational drug use is something immoral that should be criminalized, or you're a person that says no, that's overreach of the state. Sometimes it's very hard for people to budge from their moral positions. People, for some reason, take it to be very fundamentally bound up with their identity and their sense of their self, that they hold those moral views. But we should, at least as critical thinkers, be open-minded enough to engage in discussion and debate about the moral views that we hold and that we cherish. Because, you know, a good critical thinker is always open-minded to the possibility of new ideas. That doesn't mean that you will change your mind, but that you at least have the possibility of debate and discussion open. Okay, so next I want to do this. I want to describe for you guys 3 different types of action in ethics. So in ethics, there are 3 main types of action. And by knowing what these are, we'll have an even more robust understanding of the theoretical study of morality. So 3 main types of action in ethics. Okay, so first of all, we have actions that are called morally impermissible. Okay, second, kind of the contrary to that, the reverse of that, actions which are classified as morally permissible. And then finally, actions that are classified as morally obligatory. That's the third kind. Okay, so morally impermissible, morally permissible, and then morally obligatory. So let's start up at the top there. What do you think is being spoken of when a person says an action is morally impermissible? What could that mean? In other words, if it's morally impermissible, what do you think that means about that type of action? That it's, in other words, what type of action? See if you have a guess. Not allowed, yes, and something wrong. Okay, very good. That's all good. That's correct. So a morally impermissible action is just an action that is not permitted by morality. So it's something that's wrong to do, morally wrong. And it's not okay to do that. So I'll put it here. These are just actions that are wrong. And in less formally speaking, they're just not okay to do. So, morally impermissible, wrong, not okay to do. That doesn't mean that it's not possible to do. Of course, it's not physically impossible to do something wrong. Many people do wrong things that are morally impermissible, and it happens all the time. But what we're saying is that morally speaking, they shouldn't have been done, and it was wrong for them to be done, and it's not okay. So probably you can give me clear examples of some actions that would fit into that class. So what do you say? Based on your judgment, or maybe we can have examples that are clear and there won't be much disagreement. What could be an action that is a morally impermissible type of action? For example, doing what sort of thing, or what thing? Okay, so Andy, you're coming with stealing, lying, academic cheating. That's all three good examples. Stealing. To steal is to take property from others that you don't own, that they've not given you as a gift. So clearly the transfer of possession is not merited by any valid consent. And since they earned the wealth that provided them with the ownership of the property itself, you've taken away their property and deprived them of something that they have every reason to continue to possess. So that's obviously wrong. Everyone knows stealing is wrong, not okay to do. Lying. Now, let me just say, lying, of course, is generally thought to be wrong, and I would say in almost every case it is. But, you know, as a philosopher, you always got to try and dream up possibilities where there could be exceptions. And I can imagine the possibility of some lies that could be morally justified, at least some might say. Like, for example, if you thought that someone wanted to kill another person and they asked you, where'd they go? And you say, oh, they went that way. But you know that they didn't go that way and that they went in the whole opposite direction. You're trying to misdirect the killer because telling them the truth is going to probably conduce to the harm of the victim. Now, could that be a lie that is morally justified? Perhaps. But probably in the most cases that you are thinking about, lying in order to protect yourself against your own misconduct and stuff like that. Clearly that's wrong. Academic cheating, certainly that's wrong. That's not okay to do. Do people ever do it? Of course, but they're doing something that's a breach of morality. They don't deserve the grade that they get if they get a grade that's awarded based on someone else's merit. So it's disrespectful to the educational process. It couldn't be done by everybody and have the system still work. So that's wrong, I would say, for sure. Let's see. Dominic, killing, raping, and stealing. Those are easy cases. So killing, way up there, high at the top. You're talking about another lie, Andrew. Yeah, to be polite. The person saying, do I look good in this outfit, for example? And you think, no, they don't. But if you told them the truth, that would really hurt their feelings. So you just lie and say, oh, you look amazing. Maybe that's another little noble lie. But let's not get the wrong message here. We're not saying that lying is a good thing for the most case, but there could be exceptions where maybe it's justified in some. Killing people. Okay, obviously, that's way high on the scale of immoral, impermissible actions, you know, one of the worst. People's lives are certainly not yours to play with or to dispose of. Think about yourself, right? You don't want anybody coming and killing you, so it's obviously a two-way street. That's got to be one of the most grave moral misdeeds anyone could commit, because life is so precious that the unnecessary destruction of it, especially when it's innocent, seems to be on the highest order of immoral behavior. But there's other things, raping, of course, you know, non-consensual sex against an unwilling partner. I don't even know if you could call that a partner, but yeah, against an unwilling victim. Certainly immoral, and I don't think anybody would justify or defend that in any case. So there's torture, there's genocide, rape, killing, lying, stealing. There's also a little bit of lesser things too, like just breaking promises, right? Say that I made a promise to somebody to pick them up at the airport, they need a ride. And I told them, look, I swear, I put it on everything. I'll be there to help you with the ride. Now they've arrived. They're waiting for me. Time is passing. I'm late. They call me. They're like, what's up? You're still coming, right? You promised me that. And I'm like, oh yeah, I did promise you, but I'm not coming. What do you think about that? The whole point was I was lying just to get you caught at the airport with no ride. How do you think that feels? Now you can't get home. Loser, and so I just hang up. If I did that, I would be doing something immoral. I would be doing something morally impermissible, because when I make a promise to do something, the promise obligates me to perform the promised act. If I wanted the liberty to not do so, then I shouldn't make a promise to do it. Now, notice this. Here's a little point to be importantly mentioned. These terms here, they're not about the same thing as law. Morally impermissible does not necessarily mean illegal. Like, for example, I just talked about lying when I say I would pick someone up at the airport. Is that morally impermissible? Yeah. But is it a criminal act? No. That's not a legally enforceable contract. That's just a personal verbal promise. So it's not like the person on the other end can say to me, you think this is funny? Okay, well, get ready for my lawyer and the police because I'm going to file a report on you. There'd be no basis for a legal report because there's no legally binding obligation to do it, but it's a moral obligation that he created there. Okay, so good. Let's go ahead then to the next. So if morally impermissible actions are things that are wrong, things that are not okay to do, what then, by contrast, would you think that morally permissible actions are? What's the definition of that? What do you say on that? So morally impermissible, wrong, not okay. Morally permissible, what? What do you think? So it's like the opposite. But let's see if you put this together. Morally permissible? Things that are okay to do, yes, Dominic. And in terms of the first little part of the definition, I would just say it this way. Actions that are not wrong. They're not wrong morally, and so they are okay to do. Now, okay, good. So, well, Dominic, I don't know about that second point you make there, or also not. I mean, sure, they're also okay to not do in most cases, but we're going to focus on the fact that they are okay to do. So yeah, like morally permissible actions are not wrong; they're okay. So I think I get the sense that this group, this class that is watching this, is a good moral group of people. That's just the vibe that I get. So I'm going to be generous to you, and I'm going to assume that it'll be so easy for you to give me examples of morally permissible actions, because just looking at your own life, you're going to be like, that's 100% of my own actions, right? Because you never do anything wrong. So tell me, whether from your own experience or just others, what are some examples of things that are morally permissible to do? Defying an unjust law, okay. That is, I would say, yeah, a morally permissible act. But you're mentioning something that I was going to hold off on for just 1 second, because I wanted to furthermore discuss the distinction between ethics and law. But yeah, so say that there was unjust laws. In fact, of course there were. Like we had slavery in this country, and it was therefore illegal at that time to free a slave. The Underground Railroad that was being, run by Harriet Tubman and other people, were technically in violation of the law that then existed, but those were not immoral people doing immoral actions. So their defiance of the law there was righteous, because the law itself was immoral and unjust. But that's a heady concept, and that's a heady example, and it's a fair example, but I also want to get some little lesser everyday things. Dana, you say taking care of your sick mom. Fair point, right? So if you had a sick mom and she needed some care and assistance and you provided that to her, nobody would look at you and say, what are you doing? That's shameful and wrong. Certainly that's not wrong, and that is okay to do too. But here's the thing I've noticed in these couple examples. You say defying an unjust law, taking care of your sick mom. Those are both good examples. But it's also not only the things that are so noble and self-sacrificing. It's also all the little daily things where no victim is created and no one is harmed. So the things that you're at liberty to do, even if they don't have any, let's say, positive impact. So you said buying groceries. That would be good. Yeah, that would be another one, right? So if I buy groceries, as long as I'm not buying human beings or like, something weird like, I don't know, black market, goods that people had to be killed or hurt to provide. Yeah, buying groceries in the ordinary case. You see, I'm a philosopher, so I always got to think deeply about, is there any counterexample to that? But when you go out and buy groceries, yeah, you're not doing anything wrong. It's your money, and those are items that you want or need. Staying true to promises, yeah, keeping promises is morally permissible. But hold that thought, Andy, because it also is a little bit more appropriate to put that one in the third category, actually. Eating your favorite food, sure. Unless you like eating human flesh or something, but yeah, for the most part, eating your favorite food would be no problem. Let me give you an example. What if I wanted to go buy a Rolex watch right now for $10,000? Take money out of my account and go buy that. Is that morally permitted? Opening the door for someone, good example, Cynthia. Even though nowadays with the whole pandemic, they probably don't want you to get as close to them as that anymore. Sorry to say. Yeah, wait, sorry, what was my last question? Oh yeah, so you said yes, it's morally permissible for me to buy that Rolex. Why is it morally permissible? I guess it's because it's my money and I've earned it, so I'm free to spend it on things even if they're not the most wise purchase. As you can see, I already have a watch, so if I bought a Rolex, it would just be as a status symbol. But I'm morally permitted to do that, even if it's not perhaps the most charitable use of the wealth, and maybe more benefit could have been derived from the same expense for other things. But I'm morally permitted to do that. So anyway, morally permissible actions is just anything under the sun that you could not be morally blamed for doing. So they're all the things that are not wrong and they're okay to do. You say it contributes to GDP. Perhaps that's true, Dominic, but I don't know. Couldn't I have given it to cancer research or vaccine development for COVID, and it might have made a bigger impact on human happiness? But anyway, I'm not saying it's wrong. It is not wrong to do that, even if there could be more generous actions. Morally permissible actions, therefore, are not only limited to like noble acts of self-sacrifice and valor. They include those, but they also include all the smaller things in which no one is really doing anything that harms anybody. Okay, so if I want to, like, I don't know, do something odd and unconventional, wear a chicken suit as I walk down the street. I mean, I'm morally permitted to do that, even though it's not really going to probably be popular or win me any friends, and it might actually be to my disadvantage, but I'm morally permitted to. Okay, so third then, the morally obligatory kind of actions. Based on that term and terminology, what do you think it means when an action is morally obligatory? It goes beyond just being morally permitted. So what do you think that does mean? Morally obligatory means what? What do you think it means? If it's a morally obligatory act, we are saying that yes, these are things that you must do, that you're obligated to do so. So those are actions that you must do, and it would actually be wrong not to do them. Okay? In other words, wrong or not okay to not do. So what I wrote there, if it's not easy to read, because I know it's at the bottom here, I'll write it in the chat. Okay, so morally permissible actions are actions that, like, you may do, but you're not required. Well, I don't know if I should say that, because morally obligatory actions, they're always permitted because you can't be obligated to do something wrong. But not every permissible action is an obligation. So every obligation is permitted, but not every permitted action is an obligation. So about the Rolex watch that I just said, that would be morally permissible, right? But am I morally obligated to buy the Rolex watch? That I hope you can easily understand or answer. Do I have an obligation? Must I buy the Rolex? Or else I'm wrong? Is it morally obligatory to buy the Rolex, or just permissible? Right, so I think your answer is that it's not an obligation for me to do that, even though I may do so. I don't have to do so. I have the freedom to not do that, but I could, and if I did, it wouldn't be wrong, let's suppose. So what is a morally obligatory action then? It is something that you're not really supposed to feel like you have an option to not do it. You're obligated to do it. So what maybe could you argue or say or defend as a morally obligatory action? This may be a little harder to come up with, I guess, because it's easy to think of things that you may do, but it's a little trickier to come up with a precise example of something that would be wrong not to do. But there are examples, and let's see if maybe you could figure any of them out. What might be Well, Dana, this is really kind of not the right idea. Breathing's not a choice. Try not to breathe. You're going to pass out or die. It's an autonomic action of your nervous system. So that's not an action. An action is done deliberately based on wanting to do it. So no. And by the way, you're also free to stop breathing, I think. If you didn't want to live, I mean, suicide, people do that. And so morally speaking, your life is yours to dispose of. Others aren't, but yours is. So a different example. Dominic, calling 911 when someone is in extreme danger. Yeah, I would say that's probably a moral obligation. We talked about Kitty Genovese earlier in the class. So you might think that if I'm in a position to ask someone to assist and provide help, then I'm not just permitted to call the 911, but maybe I have a moral obligation to do it. And if I didn't, that would be wrong. That seems like a good example to me. Stopping an assault on a child. Well, Andrew, I mean, at a risk to your own life, that might be something that people would not necessarily claim as an obligation. What if the only way of stopping the assault would be to place your life at risk? Some people have a duty to do that because they've taken in professions which obligate them to act on those roles, like police officers or, I don't know, mandated reporters like me, for example, as a professor. But just an everyday citizen walking down the street, I mean, aren't they morally permitted to decline intervention, even if it's perhaps all things considered noble to do it? I mean, so I'm just kind of, that's one area, that's one issue where some would at least perhaps debate. But the assault on the child is a wrong action. That's indisputable. The question is just whether you have a moral obligation. No, but the thing, Andrew, is I don't think you have a moral obligation to take risks that would cancel out the value of the thing you're preventing, right? So if the end result was you failed to prevent the assault and you just got murdered by the attacker, then doesn't that create more harm to you than the assault would have created if you had not gotten involved? So I'm just saying, like, easy rescue is an obligation. If you see a child drowning in a pond and all you got to do is like extend your arm and pull them up and you don't have any risk, then surely you're obligated to do that. It would be an evil thing for a person to just coldly walk by and say, that's not my child, I didn't put him in there, so I don't know why they're drowning, but it's none of my business. But if going in there meant that you're going to be attacked by sharks that are circling all around them and stuff, then you might say, well, my obligation here is kind of trumped by the fact that it's almost too dangerous for me to discharge that duty. But anyway, just a point of discussion. I understand what you mean. Keeping a promise. Good example, Robert, and that exactly fits what's been discussed earlier. When you make a promise, you create an obligation to follow through. You no longer have the liberty to just not do so. If you had not promised, then you would have had that same freedom. But promising takes it out of your hands. Marriage vows, right? I don't know, a kind of promising, very significant promise. You're up there in front of your family, the state, and maybe God, if you believe in God, and you declare right there, I vow to remain, to love, honor, and obey you, to remain faithful until death do us part. After that, if you cheat and you forsake the vow, I guess you violated a moral obligation that you deliberately entered into by choosing to make the vow. So that's a special kind of promise that you ought to keep, I guess. But some people break those too. Dominic, you say, so if it seemed right to do it, but you got killed and the child got killed anyways, yeah, okay, so you're following up on my commentary there. You can choose a safer action such as calling 911. Okay, so we kind of went back and forth on that. Let's say if I went to a restaurant, well, now restaurants are all closed, but if I went to a restaurant and I ordered food and I ate the whole meal, do you think I'd be morally obligated to pay the bill at the end? In this case, I would say, and I hope you agree, yes. It's not that I may pay the bill, I must pay it. If I don't, then I'm both in violation of a legal but also a moral obligation because I undertook the process of ordering in the full knowledge that compensation was a requirement. So the service and the meal and the expenses they had to take on in order to provide it for me have to be compensated by me, the consumer. So, you know, another case of a moral obligation, and that's kind of equivalent to not stealing. Now, look at this. There's a logical connection between this category and this category, which we're kind of touching on now. So not doing something that is an obligation is impermissible. So like not keeping a promise is wrong. On the other hand, not doing the things that are impermissible is an obligation. So since it's impermissible to like commit murder or rape or steal, you have a moral obligation to not do those things. So you have a moral obligation to not do any of the wrong things, and it's wrong to not do the obligatory things. Now, we talked about the difference between law and ethics. There's an overlap between them, but they're certainly not exactly the same. And the reason for that is because we do and can engage in moral criticism of the established laws. And sometimes we think that the laws themselves overreach, and they establish penalties which don't correspond to anybody doing anything wrong. Okay, so like, for example, sometimes people think that things that are legal could still be immoral. As an example, today, some people are pro-life and all that, so they think abortion shouldn't be performed and it's morally wrong, and some people protest it and all of that, right? But it's legal. It's legal and it's protected by the Constitution ever since the Roe versus Wade decision back in 1973, I believe. So to a person that thinks it's wrong, they're not just going to have the question settled by saying, but the law says it's okay to do. So you can have righteous civil disobedience of an unjust law. Going back in history, we talked about slavery, okay? And clearly slavery is immoral and unjust. But at one time it was legal. So just because something's legal doesn't mean that it's moral. Also, just because something's illegal does not always mean that it is immoral. It would have been illegal to free those slaves back during the time of slavery. It would have been illegal to give safe harbor to Jewish people in Nazi Germany, like with the Anne Frank house. But the people that did those things and broke those laws were not necessarily, or were not doing anything wrong morally. Some people disagree with current day drug laws, you know, recreational drugs that are Schedule I prohibited by the federal government. Some people will say, look, the state doesn't want me to smoke marijuana or something, but I don't find that immoral at all. So sometimes you disagree with the laws. And when you do, you're making moral criticisms of the laws. If law and morality were the same thing, then there would be no basis to critique law. That would mean that when you stand against the law, you're just an immoral person. But that's not necessarily always true. We bring our moral compass to the judgment of law itself. So when you think about ethics, I want you to think about it more on the perspective of the legislator who decides on the laws than the citizen who is the subject to those laws. Because imagine if you're a senator or a congressperson, and the question coming before you is, like, suppose there's like repeal of marijuana criminalization is on being debated in Congress. Now you're the senator, and the bill comes before you, so you can vote to approve it or vote to defeat the bill. In that case, you can't say, well, my choice is going to be dictated by what the law says I have to do, because you're the law maker in that case. And you have to therefore bring your original moral judgment as to what should the law be. So when you think about morality, you're thinking normatively, not just descriptively. That means you're thinking about how things ought to be in an ideal moral universe. Therefore, we are free to morally condemn and criticize existing law, or to support conduct that is the subject matter of legal prohibitions. Obviously, there's reasons to, justifiably protest bad law. And if there wasn't, then we wouldn't even value the fact that we have the freedom of speech and assembly to make our views clear when we don't agree with some settled or open matters of topical discussion in the law. Okay, so good then. We've talked about three major types of actions within ethics. We've given some good examples of the different kinds. Dominic, you say this: pro-life and pro-choice are ongoing moral debates. Is there a way to truly figure out which is right? Are there some things that cannot be morally categorized? Well, all I can tell you about that debate is that there are significant essays and arguments that have been put forward in the philosophical world that have been published. And you've got very prominent authors on either side. You've got some good pro-life and some good pro-choice arguments. And all that you can do is study those arguments and consider which ones that you found to be more persuasive. There's never going to be universal moral agreement on many issues. We're never going to get 100% of everyone on the same page that all agree with one of those two moral perspectives. But what you can do is provide yourself with justification for your view by examining the arguments and then being able to report the arguments to defend your beliefs. I mean, I have to teach that entire debate in other classes which focus simply on ethics. And I know those arguments very well. The classical pro-choice arguments, there's a couple of different ones. Some of them assert that the fetus is not a person and only persons have a right to life. So the fetus in its fetal development stage does not yet have a right to life because it won't be a person until later. Other people say that maybe it is a person, but the woman still has a right to decide to stop an unwanted pregnancy. So if the pregnancy was not done deliberately through like rape or failure of contraception, then some people would say that regardless of whether this is a person, the person does not have the right to occupy the woman's body because it's her choice whether or not to let a person stay there or not. And then there are pro-life arguments. Some of the best pro-life arguments, the best one I've read, it talks about the potential of the fetus to one day be a fully functioning person like us. And since it has a future like ours waiting ahead of it, some people say that's what grants it the right to life way back at the very first moment of conception, because a being that would eventually be able to think, talk, reason, engage in these type of moral debates and so forth, has a certain status that's special and unique. It's more important than a non-human animal that will never have those higher abilities. So, I mean, there's lots of arguments. They just go on and on. You know, you'll study those arguments if you ever do want to, and then maybe come to your own view. But I think it's best to have a view that's based on logical examination of argument instead of just kind of formed from your gut feelings and stuff. Dominic, in which case morals is separate from truth? What I'm trying to say is someone could believe something is right, but unlike a truth which matches reality and has one answer. Well, we will talk about that too, Dominic, because some people believe that ethics is objective, and other people think that ethics is relative. And those are the two major differences in the world of ethics: moral relativism versus moral universalism. So there's people that are in either camp. To a moral universalist, there is a right answer. There's a factual answer about what's right and wrong that could be determined by the correct moral theory. To a moral relativist, though, there's no objective facts or answers about what's right and wrong. It just depends either on the individual or on the society they are a part of. Now, I know a lot of people, especially young adults and adolescents, are really heavy into the whole relativism idea. Like, there's no facts about whether something's right or wrong. It just depends on agreement between people and opinions that they may share. But the dominant trend in ethics, in professional ethics in the academy, tends more towards moral universalism, actually. And when it comes to moral universalism, there are a couple of powerful theories, and we're going to talk about those also in the next two meetings. So all the things you're mentioning here are definitely going to be somewhat discussed as we follow through the next two lectures on Chapter 9. Okay, so yeah, let's see. Then I just want to say one more term for you guys for today, and then we'll move on and get ready for Thursday. So the last little vocabulary item for today is this: moral reasoning. Moral reasoning is just the process you go through when you, as an individual, make a judgment call about what's right or wrong, or about what you should or should not do. So when you're the moral judge, either of other people or your own behavior, and you look at some conduct and you think of it as immoral or moral, or you make a decision about this is something that I should not do, or this is something that I really morally should do. When you think about these things, right and wrong, or how you should or shouldn't act, and when you make a judgment, you're doing moral reasoning. Okay, so that's it. It is when you make a decision about what is right or wrong, or about what you should or should not do. Moral reasoning. So this is a class in critical reasoning and writing, and we've just talked about the concept of reasoning overall, like trying to reasonably determine the truth of a particular claim. And in everyday reasoning, you have arguments. You have arguments which contain premises which lead to some conclusion that you're trying to demonstrate. And we should reason in order to try and have the best understanding of what's true and false. But reasoning is also involved in judgments not just of what is true or false, but what is right or wrong. So when you examine events in the world and you observe things happening, you might come across certain policies or certain positions that people hold or certain conduct that they commit. And you may have a moral viewpoint about that. You may see this policy or action and you may think that is a wrong thing and that is just terrible. That's my view and that's my judgment. In that case, you're morally reasoning. In other cases, it may pertain not to the moral classification of an action, but whether you should or shouldn't do something. So you're thinking of turning in the plagiarized assignment and you're just questioning, should I do that or not, morally speaking? Moral reasoning is something that we all face. A lot of times, as I was explaining earlier, it's somewhat unconscious to us. But by becoming a little bit more well-versed in the terminology and concepts of ethics, we're going to try and make this moral reasoning process a little bit more self-aware and precise. So you're going to not necessarily just come up with moral conclusions out of nowhere, like you don't even know why you feel that way. But you'll be able to give the reasons, the premises that provide a basis for your moral conclusions. By having moral principles and being able to assess the reasons for your moral conclusions, you're going to have a bit more of conviction of your own beliefs. When people say, I have these beliefs, but I have no reason why, then how really seriously can they take their own convictions? But when you have moral beliefs that are grounded in moral reasoning, that you could articulate and defend, then there's a little bit more substance and a little bit more, I think, solidity to your moral outlook on life, which is a good thing. So we're just working with this new chapter. We have 2 more meetings on it. Today was just the first look, the first taste of it. I just told you what ethics is. It's the study of morality and moral concepts. After that, we just kind of went through a little range of moral binaries that are opposed to each other, whether it's good, bad, or right or wrong, just and unjust, how you should or shouldn't act. Then we told you that there are 3 major types of moral action: the morally impermissible, permissible, and obligatory. We gave examples of the different cases and explained how they're different. And then now I just talked to you about what is moral reasoning. So that's kind of all that I wanted to mention today. I'm trying to space out the content of these 3 meetings so that we don't get through it too fast. So that's why I think I'll just end pretty much now. But does anybody have any other questions or comments of any kind about this class, about the lecture, about the upcoming homeworks? Good. Let me hear. What's that question, Dominic? We spoke about equality versus inequality and right and wrong. Yes, that's right. I told you, though, that I thought that was a little bit more, that's a kind of contained within the concept of justice and injustice, which has to do with distributive fairness. You say, what about the idea of an eye for an eye? Well, there are different theories of punishment in the criminal law. So there's retributivism, which says that you give the person the punishment because they deserve it. And in some retributivist ways of thinking, there's eye for an eye, except it's not exactly literally an eye for an eye. Like if someone plucks out your eye, we don't take them to court and say, okay, guilty as charged, let's get their eye out. Instead, we give them, a penalty which is consistent with our sense that we have to be humane and treat humans with dignity, but still they have to pay a price for the crime, which is somewhat comparable to the level of harm that they caused. So, an injury at the level of making someone half blind would probably receive a pretty severe sentence under the law. Dana, you say this. So for the homework, I mentioned about the Vietnamese broadcast, but they mainly do domestic broadcasting. In fact, they take some clips from CNN and input into their news. It should be okay. Let's just say, make sure that it's recent, and if they have a good dose of international news mixed in with their local Vietnamese news information, then that would be fine. Yeah, I just don't want it to be completely disconnected to anything in the United States. And so as long as what you're telling me is true and there's a healthy mix of international and domestic news, then that would not be a problem. I'm sure a lot of the news that's happening around the world is focused on the pandemic anyway, so it could be that it's fair. But as a general matter, I want most people to use U.S. news. I can give you an exception, though, Dana. That'd be fine. Yeah, so eye for an eye. Other people say, though, that the right theory of criminal punishment is, what do they call it, deterrence. So retribution and punishment is morally permissible. Well, according to the retributivist school of thought, it is. But some people think that the only real reason that you would punish someone is to rehabilitate them or to deter other people. Now, suppose that the individual is already rehabilitated, and suppose that nobody's going to learn from their example of what not to do, like they have no social influence that could be discovered by means of them being exempted from the punishment. You might argue that in that case, there's no actual good logical rationale to apply the punishment because the typical reason is missing. They don't need rehabilitation. They've already fully taken accountability in terms of the fact that they did something wrong. So some people are retributivists. Some people have deterrence theory. What everyone seems to agree on is that there's definitely a place for punishment in criminal law, but what's the rational justification for it? That's something that people can sometimes disagree about. The eye for the eye concept, I think, is most well defended in retributivist thinking about criminal punishment. That no matter what happens, even if you're fully rehabilitated and even if nobody's going to be deterred, you just deserve the punishment because of what you did, and you'll always deserve it until you get that penalty. So yeah, I mean, some people, of course, think that that's kind of a more deontological thinking about punishment, and the deterrence theory is more utilitarian. So we will actually come back to utilitarian ethics versus duty-based ethics in 2 lectures from now, and so this might come back up again. And then Andrew, you say it's assigning a cost to a negative action. Yes, but why assign the cost if there's nothing to be purchased with the cost? Andrew, you know what I'm saying? Like, suppose that aliens came down and this guy that committed murder is the last man on Earth. You know, pandemic took everybody else out. And so there's no jails, there's no accountability. He's just walking around the Earth as the one survivor. But now imagine these super intelligent aliens which have ethics come down to the planet and they find the last human. And they learn this fact, that he committed a brutal act of murder against innocent people. Should they punish him now? Or should they just leave him on the planet Earth wandering around because he can't hurt anybody and there's nobody to be affected by his behavior anymore? What do you think about that hypothetical, Andrew? Does he deserve the punishment or is it pointless now? Punishing him is going to just be to put the last human on Earth in a prison cell being fed by the aliens. Should they just leave him be or not? What's the morally right thing to do? I wonder, that's going to tell me about how you think about morality and how you think about punishment. Is a punishment only proper when there's a point to it, when someone's going to like correct their behavior or when it's going to spill over into future good behavior? What if there's no possibility that the punishment's going to generate any value? You say that would be his punishment, but isn't it just gratuitous now, the punishment? Because there's nobody who's benefited by it. I'm just playing devil's advocate. I don't necessarily agree with what I'm telling you, but definitely there are some rational people who say the whole point of punishment is to bring people in line with the right order and to prevent against future misconduct. But in this hypothetical I'm giving you, there's no misconduct that could possibly be given because there's no people anymore to do bad things to. And furthermore, whether he's rehabilitated or not, it's not like he can do anything now that's going to cause harm to another human because there's no other humans. So you just say give him the punishment because damn it, he deserves it. Even if there's no practical benefits to be derived from it. That's just his just deserts. That's a true retributivist, Andrew. So you really have those retributivist moral intuitions, I guess. A high price deters one from buying. Well, a high price deters one from buying, sure, but the thing is, this guy, he's limited in our hypothetical from doing anything. I mean, on a planet where he's alone, why do we care about deterring him? There's nothing to deter. He can't commit murder or rape or steal anything because he's alone on the planet. But anyway, I know what you mean in general. But now you're switching your motives, though, because you just said before that he should get the punishment just because that's what he deserves. But now you're saying because it'll deter him. But I just eliminated the whole point of deterrence in means of the hypothetical I constructed. Morality then no longer exists? Well, now we're really going down the rabbit hole. Well, I guess maybe the aliens should punish him then, huh? Because I don't like it that there's no more morality. Anyways, guys, very interesting and fun discussions as usual, but I'm going to let you guys go. Take care so much, and I'll see you back on Thursday. At that point, we'll just continue going through these chapters, this last chapter. Okay. I don't agree with you guys, though, I think morality would exist even if, let's say, there was only one person, because how could it only just come into being or spring out of nowhere when there's a bunch of people? I don't know, maybe that's true though. Maybe human social organization provides us with some kind of standards to apply in our conduct with each other. But I'm a little bit more of a moral objectivist, so I really hold fast to the idea that there's something universal and real, and it's not just like a big make-believe game that we're making up. Who'd be the judge? The concept of reason. Human reason would be the judge. Where's human reason come from? I don't know, maybe it's coming from God, or maybe it comes from evolution. But it's something, isn't it? Because how are we even talking right now if reason wasn't able to develop technology? Do you really think that reason can only discover physical facts and that it cannot discover moral concepts? If so, then why are we talking about it? We're human beings talking about ethics. If Hitler was that last person, I'll make an exception every time for him. So yeah, for sure. Anyways then, guys, take care, and I'll definitely see you then on Thursday. Bye-bye.